Hello there and welcome. I'm Reverend Nhien, founder of Evolving Enneagram and the author of The Enneagram of the Soul, a 40-day spiritual companion for the 9 types. If you've been seeking a compassion-based, contemplative approach to Enneagram-informed transformation, you are certainly in the right place. This is where contemplation meets the Enneagram. We are now in week 7 of a 12-week Sunday talk series based on the theme 9 Points of Light. Today we'll explore the final point in the heart center of the Enneagram, Enneagram 4, embracing your shadowy depths. And I just like to note that as we embrace, like we talk about shadow and light today, I'm having some struggles with the window here. I mean, it's beautiful, but you'll notice that I'm sorry that it might be a little hard to see me as the light comes in at this uh, time of day. So today in part 1, I'd like to explore the essence quality at point 4, which is called essential identity or depth, as this point relates to all of us, not just those who identify as type 4s. And we will also explore briefly how the personality type 4 separated from a clear sense of its own identity, like its spiritual identity, attempts to curate a sense of self that is special, distinctive, one that is identified more with the shadow than with the light, more with suffering than with joy. In part 2, I'll guide you through a brief contemplative journey. This is for all the types, as usual, to invite you to embrace the shadow of your personality type as part of your journey of realizing wholeness, right? Realizing the depths of your true identity, your beauty, your sacredness. So let's begin. So, part 1, shadow and depth at point 4. This week, we are focused on embracing the shadow, or what I call the shadowy depths, through the lens of point 4 on the Enneagram. And yes, the essence quality, like the quality that is like home base, if you will, for 4s on the Enneagram, the essence quality at this point is sometimes called depth, and sometimes called essential identity, right? Like spiritual identity. So John Lukovich refers to it as depth, describing it as inexhaustible dimensionality and indeterminate mystery. I love that. And then Hamid Ali, again, whose pen name is A.H. Almas, refers to this as essential identity and defines it as the unique, essential identity of our soul. Now, as part of the heart center, point 4 represents like our soul's legitimate, natural longing to be deeply and authentically itself, to live in contact with what is most real and beautiful and meaningful within us. And remember, the heart center in general, not just at point 4, but the heart center is very much related to our identity. This question, who am I? And that this personhood matters, right? Yet, when we operate from personality, we see how the heart center is very much related to not who we actually are, but our self concept. And so that's why we'll also call this the image center of the Enneagram. It's not always like about image in the most superficial sense of the word, like caring about our image. It's this self concept. It's about believing that our idea of ourselves is actually who we are, right? So at point 2, we learn that our genuine selves are lovable and we can connect within to know this rather than manipulate in relationship in order to try to foster a sense of connection with others. I'm not saying we don't get to have that, but that the reaching out to have that often results in especially those who are type twos, losing this true loving connection that can flow from having presence within our own hearts. At point three, we learn that our true being is valuable. So we can function, show up, engage in life with presence from the assumption that we are already valuable, knowing that our actions don't have to be about proving ourselves or proving our worth. And then just recognizing at the high side of point three in all of us how this can cause us to show up differently, right? When we can live and move and have our being steeped in the knowing of our worth. And then finally, at point four, we come to terms with suffering as part of the human condition. And we're willing to endure what it takes to pursue our deepest longing, which is to uncover and embrace parts of ourselves that we've cast to the shadows. I mean, how many of us in our day to day says, I want to be authentic. I want to live an authentic life. Today is really about like reclaiming what that means, right? And so again, all three of these points relate to identity, and these are just nuances within that relationship to identity. But today in particular at point four, it is really about like delineating and being and knowing who we are at in our depths, right? As Almas writes, at point four, we experience the infinite as holy origin, the infinite depth of our nature. And that infinite depth is not just a metaphor, it points to the longing that we all carry. Um, but at the same time, that becomes like a soul mission for those who identify as type 4. That is to say, to be authentically themselves, which is necessarily to be unique from anyone or anything else, right? So Almas in Keys to the Enneagram adds, because the point 4 is in some deep way the origin of the soul and its qualities and faculties, fours are interested in originality. The point also shines the ground of being into the soul, the universal origin of all, and so its realization readily beckons us to move deeper into this fundamental origin. But for fixated fours, originality has lost its true source, and so it is self-centered and possessed by the ego. For the point, originality is simply the origin of one's qualities and the center of one's being, with no possession or self-centeredness. So the more liberated the four, the more the question of originality becomes a yearning for the origin rather than for being unique. And this brings the understanding that being original is not self-centered. This yearning for originality is a significant four pattern that can create the melancholy and grief, as well as the depression that characterizes many of this type. So indeed, when we lose contact with holy origin, you hear in that word, the word originality, when we lose contact with holy origin, we feel something is missing, as though we've fallen out of this stream of like being ourselves, right? And we all feel this to some degree, and we all suffer this loss, right? If we're on the path of reclaiming our divine like identity, our true self, right? That's what this means at root, like to find our way home to this. But rather than go all the way to the origin, when fours are fixated, they find home and identity in the loss and the suffering itself. And as a result, fours do not, in the positive sense, they do not shirk the darker aspects of life. And they're often, because of this, wonderful at being with others, like in times of great challenges, in times of grief. And also, we know that fours tend to point out the shadow aspects, the things that are not being named by the rest of us, as they see us gonna just going about, deeming it as superficial, because there's something in all fourness that can sort of name that thing that is hidden and shadowed and like is not being acknowledged, right? So fours will tend to point out the shadow aspects of our individual and our collective reality and help us to acknowledge and sit with parts of our humanity that we might otherwise repress or ignore because it's painful. And at the same time, I want to say, and this is like my little public service announcement, I feel out of integrity, I need to say this, contrary to popular belief, because we will often hear about suffering or sadness or feeling special and not belonging associated with a four. Contrary to popular belief, having deep feelings, struggling in childhood, or feeling misunderstood does not make somebody a four. I do believe, like other teachers like Russ Hudson and John Lukovich, that people overtype as fours. And while I am ethically, I don't feel like I'm in a place where I can type somebody else. I think it's important, if you identify as a four, to really look at whether you connect with this core identity related to fourness that is different from simply feeling like you don't belong, or or that you are deeply connected with sorrow or suffering. I know that as a type three, uh, people may not have known it, but I deeply connected with feeling unhappy for like most of my life. And that doesn't make me a four. I deeply connected with a sense of like not belonging. But what's interesting is in threeness, I'll just share personally that in threeness, the story became about like overcoming that. And so, in a way, there's a sense of not being the victim, of being the victor, if you will, even amid trying circumstances. And so I really relate to even stories and movies I see about people overcoming. But when folks are identified with type 4, there's definitely this sense of not overcoming, of like, this is that loss is who I am. So it's very hard to believe another story. Like most fours don't believe that they are empowered to be the heroes of their own lives, right? And so a lot of times when people they say, oh, I connect with a four, except this, and this, I really want to invite you, if you're doing that, to consider that maybe you're not actually a type four. Okay, that's my little aside here. For the type 4, loss and specialness becomes an identity. I am the one who has lost something essential. For the type 4, this can lead to self absorption, melancholy, envy, withdrawal, or just a blatant refusal of the ordinary, even when that can be of service to you. And one might say, it's like, because I am different, I must suffer. Because I feel deeply, I cannot be part of the crowd. Because I long for beauty and significance, meaning, I cannot rest in what is simple, mundane, commonplace. This ideal for the 4, for its identity, becomes its ego trap, its fixation that can keep it in a loop. Again, there are 9 different ego traps. So the 4th is not especially tragic, right? So this identification paradoxically causes those who are type 4s to not be their authentic divine selves, because the association with, oh, this is the way I am, like locks you into a narrowing of identity, the belief that your identity must be special, must be different, must be distinct from others. The fear that what is ordinary, simple, or mundane is somehow lesser, right? Causes you to reject, to shadow parts of your existence. And John Lukovich has said the trouble for fours is that they artificially narrow the range of what they can authentically feel, closing themselves off to the depths in themselves and the world that they truly long to experience. But awakening fours realize this authenticity that they so often preach about to others, right? Insist on in others, is actually something that they're still desperately seeking and unsure of, uncertain about within themselves, right? And uncertain about finding within themselves. And as usual, the path toward wholeness and awakening isn't ever uh, as the result of the ego saying, this is me, this is my authentic self, right? As soon as you do that, you like, this is an intellectual concept of who you are, right? This is an idea of you. As soon as you say this is me, you say that's not me. So if something like, say, joy arises in your experience, the egoic structure shadows it, of like, oh, it rejects it. It may not even let itself experience this thing that is part of your wholeness, because it's like, no, that doesn't fit with my identity as being special or unique, different, right? Or uniquely suffering. And so again, authenticity is about embracing our true depths as we are, not as we would ideally like them to be. And it's important to say here that this shadow that we've been talking about isn't inherently bad. It's definitely not something to be banished, repressed, but it is the part, it embodies, it includes the parts within us, within each of us, not just fours, that we denied, resisted, repressed, rejected, exiled, so that we can maintain whatever our self-image is, right? Reverend Robert Brummett, a Unity minister who also happened to be my mentor in seminary, in his book Birthing a Greater Reality: A Guide for Conscious Evolution, he wrote, "The shadow is in reality our essential nature in disguise. It is disguised because we have rejected it. We have refused to see it as it truly is. Instead, we see it in the way that we originally responded to it, with fear, with shame, with judgment. The shadow is a mirror of our own conscious attitude toward it. If we fear it, it will appear frightening. If we despise it, it will appear shameful. If we reject it, it will haunt us until we accept it." Hmm. Notably, Robert openly identifies as a four wing five, in fact. Uh, so it is notable how often fours are called to support the world in shadow work. As New York Times bestselling author Debbie Ford, known also for her shadow work, wrote, "When you are internally driven by not wanting to be something, you often become the opposite. This robs you of your right to choose what you really want to do with your life," right? So you can imagine, just again to pick on fours today, that if there's something that might be organically and truthfully like part of what the four wants, but it's typical, it's not special by the world standards, they might reject it, right? Because I can't, oh my God, everybody's wearing clothes like that. I can't dress like that, right? Even if you secretly might like it, but you don't let yourself have that. And so Debbie Ford also taught the shadow contains all parts of ourselves that we try to hide or deny, the parts we label unacceptable. But these same parts, once embraced, become the very soil of transformation. And for the four, this transformation that allows for us to claim their divine potential might mean reclaiming the parts of self that feel ordinary, practical, functional, and even bland. I know that's like a bad word. So fours resist them because they seem to threaten their sense of specialness. Yet paradoxically, when fours accept the ordinary, the false self begins to soften. What remains, this is so important, What remains is not dullness or blandness, but when the four opens, stops rejecting the shadow, just opens to what's authentically me. So remember Lukovich's words around it's almost like this. It's like it's the exquisite and infinite, mysterious being that can emerge. It's beautiful, and it's like multicolored, right? And it's organic and spontaneous in its expression. And as I write in my book on pages 20 through 21 in the Enneagram of the Soul, soulful fours develop a taste for the exquisiteness of everyday joys, experiences that they may have previously regarded as overly pedestrian or mundane. Their attention stabilizes better in the here and now, and they fantasize less about another more idealized time or place. As they begin to forgive life or themselves for not being anything other than what it is and what they are, they give themselves permission to feel the satisfaction of both having and being enough in the here and now. They recognize that spiritually they have never been abandoned and that nothing essential is missing. Centered in their wholeness, fours often become balanced, disciplined, and creative in ways that express not only their personal truth, but also overarching universal truths. So, indeed, fours, when fixated, tend to be particularly judgy of those they deem ordinary. They see it as fake or superficial just because it's common, as if nothing's real unless it's very distinctive, right? And reactivity is a sign that something is in our shadow, waiting to be embraced. When we're extra judgy of it in someone else, that's one clue, and we think, oh, not me, I'm anything but that, right? So Debbie Ford again says, we see only that which we are. I like to think of it in terms of energy. Imagine having 100 different electrical outlets on your chest. Each outlet represents a different quality. The qualities we acknowledge and embrace have cover plates over them. They are safe. No electricity runs through them. But the qualities that are not okay with us, which we have not yet owned, do have a charge. So when others come along who act out one of these qualities, they plug right into us. For example, if we deny or are uncomfortable with our anger, hey nines, so we will attract angry people into our lives. We will suppress our own angry feelings and judge people whom we see as angry. Since we lie to ourselves about our internal feelings, the only way we can find them is to see them in others. Other people mirror back our hidden emotions and feelings, which allows us to recognize and reclaim them. Mm. So that is the invitation to all of us this week to recognize that those who trigger us can help us to see the parts of ourselves that we've rejected. And you can hear it in the story that you're telling about them. Oh, they're so controlling. Oh, they need to have the spotlight. Oh, they need to have all this attention. And it's like probably within yourself, there's a part of you that has a legitimate desire for this, a legitimate expression of this, but it's quashed, right? And you're so scared of it. You're like, I'm anything but that. I don't want to be that. And so, this authenticity journey that we're all on together, this journey of embracing wholeness, is about saying, oh, yeah, if I keep seeing this outside myself and I keep saying, oh, that's not me, take another look. So here we move into part two, embracing your shadowy depths, a contemplative journey for all types. So let's begin by journeying through each type briefly. Remember that I'm only offering examples for you to consider, but don't let this eclipse your direct experience of what is actually triggering you in your life and how you name it, right? Like, for instance, for a lot of my life, it's not actually showing up now, but for a lot of my life, I was like, oh my God, they are so lazy. Everyone around me is so lazy. And I didn't know that laziness was a shadow part of myself. And only when I could like honor the parts of myself that like wanted to rest, that I was judging with the term lazy, the part that really didn't want to be productive, only in bringing presence and heart to that did I like come to compassion around my own um, around this part of my wholeness. And then lo and behold, what's interesting now is this doesn't show up in my life. It's so weird, like the lessons been learned, like psychically, spiritually, it's like these people are not showing up. Like everyone in my life is mutually like hardworking along with me. And I feel that sense of mutuality and partnership with so many of the people dearest to me. But this was not always the case, right? And so, yeah, so really inviting you to consider direct experience. And then, if it's helpful, let's jump into ideas by Enneagram type, starting with Enneagram 1. Embrace the part of you that is messy, lazy, or inconsistent. Another word for that might be irresponsible. So the one or part you try to discipline into silence. This part holds your spontaneity, creativity, and joy. And when you stop rejecting imperfection, you may find that goodness was never dependent on rigidity or control. Enneagram 2. Embrace the part of you that feels needy, selfish, or uncaring. This is the tender ground of your own longing to receive. When you stop pushing it away, you discover that love does indeed flow both ways. And letting yourself be loved does not diminish your giving, it makes it real. Enneagram 3. Embrace the part of you that feels like a failure, that fears being ordinary or unseen. This shadow part carries your truth, your authenticity, and your rest. When you no longer need to be admired to feel valuable, you make space for love to meet the real you, not the polished version. Enneagram 4. Embrace the part of you that feels shallow, ordinary, or emotionally flat. The parts you fear mean that you've lost your depth. This shadow actually holds your stability and a quiet contentment. And when you make peace with the mundane, you find that beauty doesn't depend on this intensity. Enneagram 5. Embrace the part of you that feels intrusive, dependent, or too much. This will likely bring up your fear of rejection or your fear of depletion. Yet, in welcoming these parts, you might discover your passion or desire for connection is vital and a source of inspiration and energy, not a threat to it. Enneagram 6. I should note here that for some of the types, a lot of what is in the shadow or repressed are actually what the world often refers to as positive qualities. And so this has been referred to as like the golden shadow. So some of our power, et cetera, can reside in that. And that's very true in the 6. So for the 6, embrace the part of you that feels confident and self-assured, the part that knows what is true without external validation. So rather than project authority outward onto systems, mentors, rules, or ideologies to find safety and stability, embrace your own inner authority as part of your wholeness. So remember that inner strength can feel dangerous to the ego because trusting yourself means risking being wrong and thus being unsafe. So, so it's a little tricky sometimes talking about the shadow is not necessarily what the world deems as negative, but what our own personality type might deem as negative because it's, in this case, it feels unsafe. Enneagram 7. Embrace the part of you that feels terrified or sad, parts that you keep trying to outrun. When you stop trying to escape inner pain or anything that feels limiting, you find that by running from the negative, you were outrunning your ability to embrace positive experiences as well, to feel the full spectrum of experiences that your life has to offer. Enneagram 8. Embrace the part of you that feels small, dependent, or afraid. The ego, self may call this weakness, but the heart knows it as humanity. When you welcome your vulnerability, strength becomes something softer and truer. It's not control, but connection. So you open into your heart space, which is part of your wholeness. Enneagram 9, embrace the part of you that is angry, assertive, demanding, opposite of accommodating, right? Or nice and kind. So this is the part you learn to suppress, to keep the peace, to remain undisturbed. And it's important to remember this energy is not inherently destructive, but when you embrace it, you might find your aliveness, the opposite of your sleepiness. When you allow it, your presence sharpens, right? And so you discover that life force that allows you to show up in the world. All righty, now let us conclude with a brief three-centered practice. So I invite you to get situated in a posture comfortable for you. Ideally, straight spine, seated with eyes closed. Let's begin by being present in the belly center. And you might notice as you bring presence to your belly center that there are fathoms of depth and mystery, that which is unknown. And what if you just stayed present with the sense of your body and its depth? And then I invite you to bring your awareness to your heart center. Bring presence there. And here we focus on the back of the heart. Whereas in the 3, it was more like the center, and the 2, it was like at the front where the heart goes out. Here at the 4 point, we go to the back of the heart and we feel for this resonance there. When we're in touch with this depth, we feel more intimacy with everything. It's a dropping away of identities, outer identities, labels. There's also an inherent beauty to these depths. Your beauty, the world's beauty. There's an availability to coming closer to who we really are. It really takes courage to go to these deeper places in the heart. The places you might normally reject. And you can stay here for as long as you want, even pausing the video. Or you might follow me in bringing awareness to the head center. And in the mind, this point four might express is how we articulate this beauty and this mystery that we perceive and that we are. And so as I close here, I want to say that often when we're triggered, this is just a reminder that it's likely bringing up a part of ourselves we don't want to acknowledge, this pain point. However, if we're willing to stay with it and try not to focus on changing the outer, right? I'm not saying don't change, it's just not as the first response. Really stay with what is happening within you. And the lesson at point four, the lesson from type fours, is we don't need to make an identity out of this suffering. But there is some truth in what the four is mimicking here, which is the understanding that suffering through experiencing this pain point rather than skipping over it is a path to claiming our wholeness, our authentic self. As Debbie Ford says, you must go into the dark in order to bring forth your light. Namaste.